Hardly looking his 39
Well, I was going to say,
years.
he's not really a boy wonder. I
No.
mean, in traditional terms, he's not that young, is he? 39.
I think boy wonders are getting older and older. Cameron would revive politics, that's the Observer. The leading articles are all seem to be supporting Cameron again. Cameron would revive politics.
And he seems rather glamorous as well. There's a kind of a style about him that you don't associate with the Tories.
He's everything. That same News the World thing, they're very excited because his missus, his wife, has got a tattoo, which they feel is a News the World kind of thing to have.
And it's a tattoo of a dolphin on her ankle, so that way you sew up both the Green vote and the Pitbull
This
vote.
man knows where he's going.
Eco-friendly. Well, I think there's some fabulous news in the papers today, but one that caught my eye in the Sunday Telegraph is Blair's baby Asbos. Now, a 10-year-old can be served a full Asbo, but they're now bringing in a baby Asbo for those under the age of 10. And this will stop all antisocial behaviour.
Violent toddlers.
Violent toddlers,
Yes,
apparently.
But as children are leaving school without being able to read and write, they won't be able to read their baby Asbos, so they won't know.
Well, this apparently is some miracle cure for their behaviour. So I think the Labour Party is feeling very
We'll look for the
optimistic.
detail on that when it comes.
Well, here is a little bit of the detail of that. Also, parents living in rented accommodation may lose their homes if they fail to control these baby Asbos. That's just a silly idea. What would be the point of throwing families out of their homes like the baby Asbos, which won't happen because children under the age of 10 are not capable of criminal acts, like the idea of throwing parents out of their homes because their children misbehave. This is an example of the sort of thinking that should be discussed behind the scenes rather than detain us on a Sunday morning.
It would worry me
papers.
if it was discussed at all behind the scenes, because they're talking about putting them in secure housing with security. I mean, it's all becoming more and more inhuman.
So this is, are you talking about premature momentum, but this is sort of premature hysteria, is it? To kind of whip everybody up into this sort of hysteria. And then, of course, when the bill comes out, it won't actually say this in quite the same terms, and we'll go, oh,
or if it does, it's blown out of the water by the Lords. It detains us, but unnecessarily. Just very quickly, it is, as we've said, David Cameron's 39th birthday. It's Margaret Thatcher's 80th birthday next week on Thursday, and the Queen is actually going to attend. It says here that the Queen and Tony Blair have been persuaded to attend Baroness Thatcher's 80th birthday. Testifies that it's likely to be her last major public outing. I certainly hope not.
You were a speechwriter working for her in her office for quite a while yourself. Do you think that after all the anger on both sides about the Thatcher years and all the controversy, the country is sort of settling down to see her in a kind of more realistic and relatively moderate light? Is she getting her place in history?
Well, I think when people lose the ability to hurt or help you, you do begin to moderate your attitude towards them. But remember, even today, Churchill is a fairly controversial character in some parts of the United Kingdom, and I think Mrs. Thatcher, Lady Thatcher, will remain so.
In the world of entertainment, she's still a dirty word.
I mean, you were a great sort of figure of the, you know, as it were, the anti-Thatcher punk years in many ways.
Well, I'm not a political person, but I know that people just will never like her in my industry. They see her as someone that was part of the start of the decline of money going into the arts, which is...
And yet the arts are pretty well funded these days, are they not?
No, I don't think they are
to the
funded
70s?
enough. I think we need to get rid of some of our violent images for the sake of the children who are being served Asbos, and have more positive funding going into more positive projects. We seem to be a nation of pessimists rather than optimists.
Well, she was never a pessimist, Margaret Thatcher, whatever else she was. She was always an optimist. She may have been a bully, but she was an optimistic bully in terms of the country. Matthew.
Marvellous story in the Sunday Telegraph. Don't we love having our prejudices confirmed? French survey reveals that only 1 French person in 10 regularly uses soap, and 1 in 25 never takes a bath or shower.
And 1 in 33 clean their teeth.
No, don't clean their teeth.
Don't clean their teeth.
No, I prefer your version.
It's like the old joke. How do you know when it's a French plane flying overhead because of the hair under the wings? Sorry.
Well, Britain apparently, according to the Observer, is hooked on ready meals. We're spending 900 million a year on ready meals, and some of us are buying these ready meals thinking we're eating healthily, and apparently not. Deirdre Hutton, who is the head of the Food Standards Agency, is being very optimistic and thinking that in cutting down fats and salts and sugars in these meals, she is going to, within 5 years, cut childhood obesity. I think it takes more than eating. It includes exercise as well.
Exercise as well. And there's an electronic tagging story I think we should at least mention.
has a wonderful electronic tagging story, and that's in the Sunday Times. A wall-mounted screen is going to be able to tell you where all members of your family are at any one moment. I imagine there may be a little resistance even within the Marr family.
I think there certainly would be to
I
that.
don't think the screen could keep up with you.
No,
and
no.
there's a wonderful story also in the Sunday Times diary. Your illustrious predecessor, Sir David Frost, is going to be doing something for Al Jazeera, and they're suggesting that he might do a through the cave hole idea. You would have perhaps
Osama
that's right. Look at the evidence. Turban detonator. Who lives in a cave like this?
I would watch that.
Yes,
I would
I would.
watch that
Yeah.
with great enthusiasm. Toyah.
In the Telegraph today, there is an article about ADHD, which is attention deficit, and that some of the pharmaceutical companies are funding the websites that parents go to. Now, there is a drug, I'm going to attempt to pronounce it, methylphenidate, which is known as the chemical cloche for children. Now, with some children, this actually works, but the problem is that it's increased in its use 180-fold in the last 14 years.
Well, you know, we've got Bret Easton Ellis, the novelist, on with his new novel later on. One of the things that really struck me about that is it's set in a family in America, and all the kids there are just being filled with different kinds of pills, uppers, downers. It's a horrific
It's
vision.
coming to Britain, as you
It's coming
as you
to
say,
Britain.
Toy. I was in Newcastle a while ago, in a particularly difficult area of Newcastle, and at a primary school I visited, a quarter of the children were on Ritalin. It's just
And a lot of
extraordinary.
this is linked to food intolerance. If we had more natural food, I'm sure we'd have less ADHD. I mean, I worked in a Barnardo centre in Birmingham 17 years ago when the 4-year-olds were threatening to kill you. They had no kind of social graces. And I put this down to, a lot of it down to diet. So I found this story incredibly disturbing, the availability of this drug.
Asparagus, not asbos, says Toyah Wilcox.
Yes.
Now, you've got a Boy George
Yes,
story
I
on
have.
Family Force.
I feel for Boy George on this one. Arrested on Friday, called the police because he had a burglary at his apartment in New York, and they found supposedly 3 grams of cocaine. Now, Boy George moved to New York 2 years ago. If he gets a drug conviction, it not only means the possibility of 15 years in jail, it means he'll be expelled from America. And I feel for him because this is a man who's got his life back together, and he's a good man. And if these drugs were planted or left by a friend, he's going to be carrying the burden of this for the rest of his life.
Matthew, you're just back from Blackpool, that time of year. Final thought about the position of the Tories? Quite a good week for the Tories, really, hasn't it?
Very good week for the Tories. A, we've been looking at them, which we don't normally bother to do, and B, they really do seem to have had a really good look at their candidates and reached some new conclusions. It's lovely in 2005 that a good old-fashioned party conference in Blackpool with people making good old-fashioned
Speeches.
in the Winter
Speeches are
Garden.
back.
Really, on that basis, we are judging potential leaders. Hooray!
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to both of you. We'll have a word later on. We've been talking, obviously, about David Cameron. So I wonder what the weather is like up there in Cameron country, the wild northwest of Scotland. Peter Gibb.
My wife's got this little dolphin on her ankle, but I think one tattoo is probably enough for
Did
the...
she consult you about this?
No, this was a long time ago. She had it done in Bali, I think between sort of school and university. And, but it's nice, actually.
Cardinals don't get tattoos.
Well, I
imagine.
don't really think so. I think it would be a bit funny, wouldn't it, for me to have a tattoo.
What do you think is the right relationship between somebody like yourself and somebody like David, between the church and the politicians? Because, of course, in the Lords, the two things are intertwined. But how closely do you think politicians should follow Christian teaching?
Well, what I think is that I would have... Well, I don't play a part in party politics, and I wouldn't dream of saying, who I'd support for the Conservative Party leadership. I'd be interested. I think... but I do think that religion and politics intertwine with regard to the individual, with regard to the family, society, with regard to the transcendent, to the people sort of looking beyond. So I think we do have a right to say things that are very fundamental in life.
So, Peter, you famously, we were talking about Margaret Thatcher earlier on, possibly David's predecessor, we'll find out shortly. Yes. You closed the Cottesloe Theatre in protest at her cuts at one point. How do you think about her now?
I think she spoilt the broadcasting system, the education system, and the performing arts. And I really don't like her as a consequence.
Well, that's pretty clear. Thank you very much indeed for that. nearly all for this week. Many thanks to all of you who wrote in or contacted us via the website. You may remember the details of the programme can be found at bbc.co.uk/SundayAM. Now, I'd like to tell you that Cardinal Murphy O'Connor is now going to play us out on rhythm guitar. But I can't because it's not true. However, the musical power of this programme is awesome. Last week, you may remember, Katie Melua played us out and her album went straight to #1. So if Mr. Bob Dylan wishes to come in and review the papers, he would be welcome. See you, if not him, next Sunday. Goodbye.
Is TV bad for us? Lively debate next this morning, the Heaven and Earth show on BBC.